Thank you all for joining us here at I-80 Sports, where today we are talking about, is it time to blow things up in Nashville, and other news and notes around the NHL. Thank you all for joining us here again at I-80 Sports. Make sure you check out our brand new renovated website, i80sports.com, which, hey, if you like this t-shirt, great for St. Patty's Day, make sure that you hit up our shop, get yourself a nice little t-shirt like this, or if this isn't quite your style, we've got plenty of other shirts that are your style as well. Make sure you hit up our shop for all of your I-80 Sports merch needs, especially as we get closer to St. Patty's Day. And, of course, make sure you follow us on Twitter at I80_sports NHL, where this week we hit 800 followers, which is really, really nuts. I never thought in my wildest dreams we'd even hit that number. So thank you guys so much for that. Let's keep that going. My goal is to hit 1,000 by the end of the year. And if we keep going the way we're going, we're going to smash that. So let's go and smash that. Let's go and do that. So keep on following, share with all your friends, especially if you like what we do. Even if you don't like what we do, just share around, because we appreciate that. I'm Brian. He's Tom. Tom, how you doing today?
Doing well. I'm a little more of a quiet week this week, so you guys won't see me go off the walls and get really angry this time around. So a little more quiet this week, but doing well.
Oh, that's sad. We like it when you're angry. We like to raise your blood pressure. But as you guys may or may not have noticed, we have a special guest this week who hails all the way from the UK. Bex is joining us this week. Bex, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, first of all, thank you guys for letting me join in. I'm super stoked to be able to be with you and to be able to visit you from the other side of that big pond that we've got in between us. A little bit late for me here at the minute, but no, it's all good. I'm really pleased to be joining you guys on the podcast. So, massive Detroit Red Wings fan coming in here. I come at my background from my dad being lucky to work in the Motor City when I was a kid. So I grew up watching sort of the Fantastic Five and then going into the 96-97 era, Yasmin, Federer, of all of those kind of players. My hockey experience might have gone slightly downhill since then, having to endure a little bit at the minute with this rebuild, but, you know, brings a different perspective to it. And anybody who gets up at 12:30 to continually watch these Red Wings games at the minute, got to be a little bit crazy and appreciating anything else that's going on in the NHL too currently. So, no, it's really great to be involved with you guys and to give you a chat and a little bit of perspective from how we see it over here.
Hey, heck yeah. I completely understand that, and it's great to have a perspective, especially in the Midwest from the Central Division as well. So it's going to be really great to catch up on Red Wings information and just to have you, chime in on certain things going on around the league, which let's dive into that, guys. Let's talk about what's been going on this week. It's been kind of a light week in the NHL, but there's still some things that went on. First and foremost, we had a big bombshell that happened as Claude Julien and Kirk Muller are out as head coach and assistant coach in Montreal, respectively. So, in turn, the Montreal Canadiens have named Dominique Ducharme interim head coach. And it seems to me that at some point down the line, Claude Julien seems to wear out his welcome with certain teams. But you can also say that about a lot of head coaches around the league. But I'll turn it over to you guys. I'll start with Tom first. Do you feel like this was the right move for the Canadiens to right the ship that they've got going right now?
I'm really not sure, to be honest with you. I mean, I know we were kind of praising them a few weeks back, and they've sort of come back down to earth. But you know what it is? I don't know if firing Claude Julien is really the right thing to be doing right now. Carey Price is not having a great year, and I think it comes from the top down in Montreal. Really, the problem with Montreal is that this ownership still thinks that it's 1977. They're still the class of the league. They're still that dominant force that they once were back in the day. And everybody in the league, everybody in the sport, except for the people running the Montreal Canadiens, seem to know that they're not that dominant team anymore. They really need to just do just a look from the top down in Montreal and really reorganize that whole organization there. Because they still, like I said, and I hate to repeat myself, but they still think that they're this top-notch organization. They haven't won a Stanley Cup in, what are we at now? Almost, where am I?
We're almost 30 years in, 28 years.
Yeah, we're almost 30 years. We're actually 28 years right now. They really haven't been a dominant. I mean, they were a little bit of a dominant team in the mid-2010s when the Rangers played them in the conference finals when they had a couple division wins. But they this whole thing just needs to be looked at from the top down and redone, I think, with Montreal. I just think these quick fixes and this fantasy world they live in just isn't working anymore.
Yeah, good assessment there. Bex, what are your feelings on this firing?
I was going to say, to be fair, I'm agreeing with that one. I think they haven't been the team for a long time. I think they need a reality check, but I don't think a quick fix is a solution for anybody. And currently, you're looking at mid-season, who's going to go that? What are they actually going to get out of that? Where's it going? It's not going to improve it. They're playing in the Canadian division as well at the minute. Take that into account. Going forwards, is it really worth it? Has it got the longevity in it? I don't know. If it was me, I don't think I'd have wanted to see it happen right now. I agree. We need the change. We need the movement. But no, for me, it was the wrong move. There's got to be bigger picture. There's got to be seen there. It's not that. It wouldn't have been what I'd have wanted to see. Are they competitive? No. Are they getting the best from the team, as you guys have touched on and said no? And you can blame the management. You can blame the coach till you're blue in your face for that. But it's a bigger picture and there's more scope there.
I think, unfortunately, in situations like these, you have, the coach that gets a short end of the stick, and ultimately they are, the scapegoat in this situation that ends up falling for something like this, unless you can manage a trade, which right now in the current landscape of the NHL and realistically thinking about a 2-week turnaround for these trades, which is kind of deterring teams from making these trades right now. I think, shaking things up that way wasn't going to be the right move, but making a coaching change this abrupt, it can be a little bit jarring. It could swing one way or the other for Montreal. The one thing I do want to bring up as a devil's advocate is, in regards to Claude Julien, this isn't the first time he's been fired midseason. When he first originally started with the Devils back in 2006, he was fired 3 days before the beginning of the playoffs, and that particular Devils team was a strong Devils team going into the playoffs, and he was fired very, very abruptly, like right towards the end of that season. There's some rumblings as to why I'm not going to get into right now because they're not totally relevant to the story, but it's not the first time he's been fired midseason. He also got fired midseason with Boston a while back as well. So it just seems like for a personality like his, for a large personality like his on the bench, it does seem like for larger personalities like that tend to wear their welcome a lot quicker. And it seems to be look, he either needs to go or, something needs to change in attitude wise. And unfortunately, I think it was just, that time for Claude Julien to, get his stuff packing. We're going to see how this ends up affecting the Canadians as time goes on, because a move like this can be good. Ducharme can be a decent head coach, but especially in an abrupt climate like this, it might be a little bit difficult. But this Montreal team does have the tools to, as they proven in the beginning of the season, to be a really good team. So it'll be interesting to see how the Montreal Canadiens end up responding to this. But moving right along in terms of the news, we did have a couple waiver moves that happened this week. Brett Connolly was placed on waivers by the Florida Panthers. He officially cleared waivers today. But to me, I've always looked at Brett Connolly as an example of potential wasted money in free agency, purchasing a player just to say, hey, we made a move. And do you feel like this was something that happened in Florida with this particular move, especially with him being placed on waivers like this, being moved in and out of the lineup when you originally signed him to be a part of your top six? Bex, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. I think there's a lot of it going on, though, if you're looking full stop with how the waiver wire is going and the caps and sort of things like that at the moment as it's happening. I think it's just another example of what's been happening there. I'm not sure, again, it was the right thing to do. Everything just feels so up in the air massively at the minute overall. It's almost like I'm just going to do it. I'm going to test the water and see what happens because they're looking for what else is going on out there in many respects. I'm not sure. Was it wasted? Was there a point of it? Could it have gone very differently if we were looking at it in different circumstances? Then yeah, possibly. But it's crazy times, and unfortunately, you don't know. Do I agree him being placed on waivers was wasted money in this free agency situation? Yeah, probably inclined to look that way. I don't know if it was value for money, but then who knows? Maybe I think it was more of a test the water move and see what's going on with that. I think there's been a lot of players sort of hitting that at the minute, and other teams around and things like that.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, just a highlight from last week with Adam Henrique and Franz Nielsen, just to name a few people, testing those waters to see where those contracts can go. Tom, what are your thoughts on, Brett Connolly being placed on waivers and clearing?
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with the both of you there. I feel like they're kind of following that blueprint now that you were mentioning before with Henrique and whatnot. Basically they're just doing it because other teams are doing it and seeing what will happen because of it. And I feel like it would have been a bigger deal if Florida was having a worse year. Florida's actually playing pretty well right now. 13-4-3, 29 points tied for first in the Central Division. So if the record was the other way around and they were 4-13 and they put them on waivers, I feel like this would be causing a bigger start. but it's not. It was just a test of water move like everybody else is doing, and I don't think anything will become of it, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, I didn't like the Brett Connolly signing at first when Florida made it a year or so back, but I mean, just him being placed on waivers, especially when he's a guy that they're supposedly trying to rely on in their top six, it's not a good look, for Florida at this point. I understand why they're making this move to try to save a little bit of money, but ultimately I feel like it's a wasted potential on that part. And then the last player that ended up being placed on waivers, Alex Stalock, goaltender for the Minnesota Wild, or should I say formerly with the Minnesota Wild, because he was claimed off waivers today by the Edmonton Oilers. The Edmonton Oilers finally making a move for a goaltender that they desperately needed. And I got to say, I was surprised to see Alex Stalock being placed on waivers to begin with, but I think it's also a testament to how much Minnesota currently believes in Cam Talbot and Kaapo Kähkönen as their goalie tandem right now. Tom, do you feel like this was the right move to have him get claimed off of waivers by Edmonton? How does this impact Edmonton?
I think it helps Edmonton out. They've desperately needed help in net all season, so I feel like this is the right move for them. Minnesota sort of had the logjam in net the past few years, so you know what? I feel like, even though Minnesota lost them for nothing, I don't think there's going to be shockwaves going through that locker room, that organization for this. And like I said, it helps Edmonton out. They desperately, and I can't stress that word enough, needed help in net. So this is a big help to them. And in a competitive Canadian division where they want to separate themselves from the rest of the pack, along with the Toronto Maple Leafs, now this gives them another guy they can rely on in back-to-back nights, or if, something happens with a COVID scare with the team. So, yeah, I think it's a good move all around.
True. Bex, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. Oilers desperately needed it. They've lacked that consistency all season and that backup behind them, especially going in the back-to-back games and things like that. Like we've just touched on, there definitely needed to be some solid structure there. But equally not sure if Minnesota, with the initial move, were thinking maybe he might just kind of slide down and be in the taxi squad, and that whether they were actually putting that much faith in their other tandem duo, I'm not sure. Probably wasn't needed there. Could have moved on. I agree, and hopefully he'll be a good pick for the Oilers, I think, in that sense. Definitely, in my eyes, better move for the Oilers than it was maybe for Wild. I think if they've got any issues there going on, maybe could have held on to him. But like you say, the value of the waivers, it was probably worthwhile for them to test it and see how it goes. So no, good pickup, I think, for Oilers.
Yeah, I thought this was a strong pickup for the Edmonton Oilers. They needed some more consistency in net, and I think Stalock can be that consistency that they've been looking for. He was dangerously consistent last year for Minnesota, and I feel he was one of the only reasons why, besides Kevin Fiala, that Minnesota even made it to the playoffs last year. So this was big for Edmonton. I think it's a blow for Minnesota, but that being said, you're not that bent out of shape because you've got goaltenders in Talbot and in Kaapo Kähkönen. It was just one of those ideas I think Bex was right about. Minnesota testing the waters, making sure that they can clear him down to the taxi squad. And unfortunately, for a goaltender of his caliber, it's a gamble that you have to take, unfortunately. And in this case, the gamble did not pay off. And now he's off to Edmonton. He will have a 2-week quarantine period. So we're not going to see him officially suit up for the Edmonton Oilers until at least March 15th earliest. So I think that could be something that's going to be an underlying theme when we start talking about the trade deadline, maybe in the next week or so, of you might see moves that occur, way before the trade deadline, just so that way they can actually those players that are traded can actually make an impact, before the end of the season. But we're going to move on from here from our news. It's time to talk about the main attraction today. Is an explosion coming to Nashville. So we wanted to talk about this week because Nashville has been trending downward for the past couple weeks, and it's been at an alarming rate, and it's time to talk about it. So here's the context behind it right now. So Nashville's current record is 10-11-0. They are currently 6th in the Central Division. Not great, but, not really good. They are 18% on the power play at the moment, which is good for 20th in the league. Stellar. And 72.86% on the penalty kill, which is good for 28th in the league. Yikes. They have 49 total goals, which is good for 27th in the league. Not very good. And 64 total goals against, which is 19th in the league. Middle of the pack. So who are their leading point getters right now? So Philip Forsberg is their current leading point getter with 19 points in 21 games. That's not bad. That's almost a point a game average, which is great. That's what you expect out of one of your top players. Who leads in goals? Once again, Philip Forsberg with 9 goals. But that's the exact highlight of the problem. Your leading goal scorer only has 9 goals at the moment, which is problematic. Leading in assists right now, Roman Josi with 11 assists. So great to see out of your captain. The current potential problem this season. Your most consistent goaltender is still Pekka Rinne, who's 38 years old. You know, a lot of people were hoping that Saros was going to emerge as that starting goaltender, take the, a lot of the weight off of Pekka Rinne's shoulders, and he hasn't been able to prove that. Saros is sporting a save percentage that's lower than 900 at the moment, and that's rough for a goaltender right now. And he hasn't shown the signs of taking the reins full time. And I feel like Nashville right now is in a holding pattern right now, biding their time until Yaroslav Askarov is ready to come to the NHL, who's currently still playing in the KHL. A big future problem for them, bloated contracts. They currently have a little less than $3 million in cap space, according to capfriendly.com. Their current contracts, Roman Josi is making $9.1 million a year for the next 7 years. Ryan Johansson, $8 million per year for the next 5 years. Matt Duchene, $8 million for the next 6 years. Ryan Ellis, $6.25 million for the next 7 years. Bloated contracts. Like, you can't afford all these guys. I'm leaving Philip Forsberg's $6 million per year contract off the list right now, just simply because he's a building block. I considered also leaving Roman Josi off that list too, because he's your only bona fide superstar on that team. And I'm also leaving Pekka Rinne's $5 million per year contract off because his contract's coming up after this year, and that'll give them $5 million of cap relief. To add insult to injury, the Predators will also be paying for Kyle Turris, and that's a $2 million cap hit for the next 7 years because of his buyout. That's huge. It's not a good-looking cap situation. There are worse situations in the league. Obviously, Toronto and Tampa Bay have significantly worse cap situations at the moment, but hey, they're actually contending for a cup. Nashville is not. So that's why it's a little bit worse. So who's to blame for Nashville's current problems on the ice? Honestly, and we alluded to it before based on like the Claude Julien situation, maybe John Hines is the reason why the Nashville Predators are not doing that well. The team has responded very differently to John Hines than they did to Peter Laviolette, and not in a good way. I soured on Hines towards the end of his tenure with the Devils. I'm a diehard Devils fan, and I soured completely on how he was running the Devils system towards the end of his tenure with the Devils. I think he's a good coach, and he's good for a developing team. Not for a veteran squad like this, though. Nashville looks lost in the neutral zone, and they're flat and unprepared on most nights. That sounds like the Devils last year. It's like a weird parallel. Weird. One argument I hear all the time is, well, this team, is bad on the power play because it's a new system. A coach has to implement a new system. That's all well and good, except Hines didn't really change much of anything to the power play. He's using the same system that Laviolette used last year. So the whole learning the new system thing doesn't really apply here. This team is doing one thing consistently wrong that the Devils did last year. One too many passes. Anytime they're in their offensive zone, they make one too many passes, and they don't end up taking the shot when they see the lane. They try to develop the play way too much, and then all of a sudden, it's out and towards the neutral zone and out for a breakaway. That's one of the bigger problems for Nashville right now. And I just don't think that Hines is the right coach for this team right now. If this was a currently rebuilding Nashville team, he could be. It's not a knock on him whatsoever. I honestly think he's better suited to be an AHL head coach, where he's not game planning based on matchups and specific strategy based on another team. I don't think he does that well. So I just dumped a whole lot of information on Nashville. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys on this one. Do you guys feel like Nashville needs to start, rebuilding? Do you think they need to trade away some of these contracts so that way they can get younger, get some picks, get some potential star power? Tom, I'm going to start off with you. Do you think it's time for Nashville to rebuild?
You know what I do, and it's the funny part about it is as I was reading your notes and as I was just doing some independent research myself, their situation is exactly what the Rangers situation was about 3 years ago, where they had gone to the finals and lost. They had won a President's Trophy, and then we're still a playoff team, but we're tailing off and we're trending downward and downward and downward each year. And they were stuck with some bad contracts. They had a elite goalie, but the rest of the team, while were good players, were not superstars. Now, it'd be different here as if these guys were top players in the league. If they had a player of like a McKinnon caliber or Mcdavid caliber or Matthews caliber, and they did what Pittsburgh and Boston had done last decade, where they sort of, lied in the weeds for a year or two and then rebuilt the depth and were contenders again. You just don't have that right now with these guys. And it's not a knock on any of them. Forsberg, Johansson, Ellis, Yossi, they're all good players. But I don't think they're superstar caliber where you can rebuild your depth around them. And should they move them? Yes. It's just a matter of if they can move them and who would take them is the problem. These contracts are pretty bloated. There's teams that you would mention back there like Tampa and Toronto who maybe could use some help, but they're not going to be able to take these contracts on. And if they do ship them to these destinations, Nashville's going to have to eat some money, and it's just a matter of how much they're going to be willing to eat to get these guys out of here to start rebuilding this thing.
That's true. Bex, what are your thoughts? Do you think that Nashville needs to start rebuilding?
In my opinion, 100% yes. I think the team's been going a little bit in reverse since they've kind of slid down from sort of 2017 backwards. As you've just said, we've watched Rangers go through it to some degree. It's like what was happening in Detroit. You've got those big name players. You've had that era. It's kind of shifting on. We're moving. Those contracts as well. We were dealing with that situation and some massively overly inflated contracts and trying to deal with that and to move around that. In a sense, it's what we've been trying to capitalize on, teams trying to offload some of those big contracts. And then we can kind of trade them for pick up the draft picks and things as well. When you've got that many big contracts on your team, though, you're not going to be able to move it around massively. I think they do need to try and rebuild in there. I think there's issues they need to address, such as those you guys have been sort of touching on. Forsberg, for me, is a key player. I agree he's not that big name player and he's not that big name star, but he has a big influence on the team. He's bringing depth to the power play and things like that and getting some of the best out of other people in that sense, in my opinion. I mean, watching them play on Saturday in the 5-2 win that the Red Wings had, it wasn't a team that they should have been, and it wasn't a game that it should have been. It was obvious of that decline and slide, and it just wasn't there. And that, in many respects, the connections weren't, and it just didn't work for them. I think, as you've touched on with the goaltending situation with Reyna there and then Saros, I think that's a very interesting situation. What are they going to do? I don't pick up on a lot of confidence in Saros and that he's staying. And that's a sort of sound move there. That leaves them with a big hole and an influence that sort of could come up in that sense. Also, similarly to you guys, had a bit of a look around and was sort of looking as well. I think controversially for some Preds fans, Fabro, mileage, I'd keep him as a guy that a lot of people are sort of saying no there. He's got potential to be a top 4 D-man and building around him. And then we've got other issues looking into that as well. Sort of Eckham's future being a little bit uncertain and that sort of thing, introducing that into the mix. Going forwards, there is the potential here for some major hiccups and big roadblocks and milestones. I think they need to be trying to see what they can trade away and what they can actually move and shift here. Although they are, like you say, crazy contracts. Who's going to take them on and where are they going to go and how much is that going to cost them in the long term, even if they're trying to get rid of them? But no, I think the situation is right and I think they should act on it now before they get themselves stuck in an even worse hole.
Yeah, and I think the big problem that you have right now, I kind of want to highlight one thing that you said, Bex, is like, you've got to be able to unload them, but where? I think that's the biggest problem that you currently have because you have teams that don't want to take on this money at the moment. For the Predators, you offloaded PK Subban to the Devils a couple of years ago, and it was perfect for them. They offloaded $9 million in cap, and then they pumped $8 million into Matt Duchene, but that's a totally different situation there. But, the Devils aren't going to be keen to take on any kind of contract like that again. Yeah, it's a friendly relationship there, but the Devils aren't going to be looking to take on that contract, especially with the emergence of Jack Hughes and realizing, hey, we got to pay him soon. Ty Smith, hey, we're going to have to pay him soon. Jesper Bratt, we just paid him, but he's probably going to want more money. Same with Pavel Zacha and his emergence, which I'll talk about a little bit later as well. For a team like the Devils, who would have been that cap-friendly team to do business with, now it's not so friendly. A team like the Rangers, they might be setting their eyes on some, on a bigger prize, down the line. For other teams like the Red Wings, Ottawa, they have younger players that they realize that they want to devote their cap to them, knowing that their potential is going to pan out. For the Red Wings, that eventually you're going to have to hand down a big contract to Lucas Raymond if he ends up panning out the way that they hope he pans out. So these are contracts that Nashville is going to have a significantly more difficult time offloading than what they had a couple years ago when they offloaded PK Subban, when they offloaded Shea Weber. They had an easier time then. Personally, I do think it's time for the Predators to rebuild. I think given the contracts you currently have, they're in an ugly place that I like to call playoff purgatory, where they're talented enough to make it to the playoffs, but not nearly talented enough to make it to the Stanley Cup. They're playoff fodder at this point, which is, if you can be content in just making the playoffs every single year consistently, but if you're not actually trying to move your feet to actually get closer there, it's not worth it. This is a team that peaked in 2017 and 2018 when they won the President's Trophy. And it's been downhill since then. They need to sell off some of these assets for draft picks. Ideally, you move them, to draft picks in 2022 when it's a deeper draft. But, you need to get some decent prospects back in return as well. This is not a team that is terribly deep in terms of prospect depth at the moment. You have the likes of Yaroslav Askarov coming up, like I alluded to before, but he's still a little bit of time off. So you need to tread, a little bit of water until then. And Pekka Rinne's not getting any younger, even though he's playing like he's younger, but he's not going to hold up for that much longer. A coaching change would be nice for Nashville too. So I think our general consensus across the board here at I-80 Sports, I think it's time to blow up Nashville. Not like that. That would be a little bit too dangerous. I think that's a little bit too heavy. No, they don't need to blow up the city. Just do away with some of the contracts. But anyway, we're going to be moving onward and upward from this topic. It's time to talk about our respective, teams that we love. And as you guys may or may not know, I'm a Devils fan to my detriment. I'm going to get these directions right at some point. I swear to God. Okay. I'm a Devils fan to my detriment. Tom is a Rangers fan to his detriment. And Bex is a Red Wings fan, much to her detriment at the moment. So right now what we're going to be doing, we're going to be entering that Rangers realm that Tom holds near and dear to his heart. So Tom, talk to us a little bit about what the Rangers did this week.
Well, for a team that had seen its share of controversy over the past week, and if you watched last week, you saw me rant and rave some more. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. They pretty much iced an AHL team out there against the Flyers on Wednesday night, and they played a good game. They lost, but they played a good game. Kreider had a hat trick, and for the cards that they were dealt, I didn't hate the game against Philly on Wednesday night. Friday night, fans back in the Garden, not 18,000 fans, 2,000 fans, but it helped. 6-2 thrashing of the Boston Bruins, one of the best teams in the league. Most complete effort for the Rangers all year that night. But the unfortunate part about it is this. The Rangers are the youngest team in the league, and the Bruins are a cup contender and a veteran team. And that showed on Sunday. The Bruins really had their way with the Rangers on Sunday. And I guess it's to be expected. This team is a young team. There's going to be growing pains. There's going to be roadblocks. It doesn't help that right now, arguably the two best forwards they've had this year, in Kakko and Panarin, are out. Doesn't help that, although Trouba has not been their best defenseman, he's the veteran leader on that back line. He's out. So for what they have and the cards they've been dealt, I don't hate what they're doing. One of the big positives this week, and I know it's not glaring out there to everybody, and I know nobody's really bowing down to this kid, but everyone was calling him a bust. And a big positive in my book, and from what I watched, was Alexis Lafreniere. He had points in consecutive games this weekend. He has 3 points in his last 4 games. He is starting to come around a little bit. Just the overall what I'm seeing on the ice from him is he's starting to look like that Alexis Lafreniere who played at the World Juniors last year. He's starting to look like the Alexis Lafreniere who played in Rimouski. Is he going to be a dominant player this year? Maybe not, but he's those parts of his game that made him the player that everyone thought he was going to become are starting to show on the ice, and I really like that. And what can make that even better is that Philip Hedel's been practicing with the team. He's been on the ice. He's been a game time decision. He's going to be a game time decision tomorrow. And him and Lafreniere looked really good in training camp, and early on in the season looked really good together. It also helps that Hedel's a shoot-first center. Lafreniere, for all the hype that he had, he's a pass-first guy. He's a playmaker, Blackwell read him really well, and I hope with Hedel coming back, and Hedel in his shoot-first center, the way he's playing, will help Lafreniere out big time, and he'll start growing into the player that we all know he can be. Some other news we have over in Europe, we have the KHL playoffs, and I am a Salavek Yulev fan for now. And my reasoning behind this is they're playing Tractor. Now, Tom, who plays for Tractor? Well, Vitaly Kravtsov plays for Tractor. If Tractor can get knocked out early on, we can have Vitaly Kravtsov over in New York within the next 2 to 3 weeks. And hopefully, maybe by late March, early April, he'll be playing for the Rangers. Same thing goes with Nils Lundqvist over in Sweden. There's rumor has it that when his team season ends, he wants to come over too. So hopefully we can get him over here too. Now, with these two guys coming over here, another thought popped in my head today. And I really didn't think about this over the weekend because there wasn't much traction behind it. But it was something we discussed last week. It was concerning that Jack Eichel trade. It's looking more and more and more likely that Jack Eichel won't be playing for the Buffalo Sabres anymore after this season. And from what I've been reading from some top NHL insiders, guys like Darren Drager, they're saying that Eichel and the Rangers are looking like a match. Now, obviously, it's early. We don't know if this is going to happen. We don't know who they're going to send over there. But my biggest fear is that they're bringing Nils Lundqvist over. They're bringing Vitaly Kravtsov over to showcase them to the Sabres and move them for Eichel. And I really hope that doesn't happen. All I can hope with Jack Eichel is this. If he does want to come here and he's a good, and if a change of scenery is going to help him, and if being a Ranger will make him become that 90-foot player he was last year, then I'd love to have him. But my hope for Eichel is that he forces his hand with Buffalo's management and says, I will only go to the Rangers. So then Jeff Gorton and John Davidson can corner Buffalo and say, hey, listen, he only wants to come here. He doesn't want to be there anymore. So, the ball's in our court now. We can decide who we're going to send to you. Fingers crossed. I don't know. Still very early with this Eichel stuff.
Yeah, it's still very, very early on with the Jack Eichel talk. And, this is going to be evolving over time, just like we were talking about last week. So anything can really happen on that regard. It's going to be interesting to kind of track and see if the New York Rangers are a match there, and just kind of more curious as to what they would have to give up to get an elite player like Jack Eichel. But that's going to be discussion for another time. Thank you for your insight there, Tom. And right now we are moving on to, Bex, who's going to be talking on about the Red Wings, which we gave her. Tom's got his Rangers realm. I've got my Devil's Den. So this week we're going to be hopping on into Bex's Red Wings award at the moment. So Bex, I'm going to turn it on over to you talking about some Red Wings this week.
Firstly, it's nice to actually be able to get some Red Wings press and to get some decent Red Wings press. I think we're getting absolutely bashed in the media at the minute. So, hey, we scored 5 goals in 2 games over the weekend. When was the last time that happened? There was a point. There was 10 goals in Saturday and Sunday. There was a point this season we weren't even putting 10 shots on goal in a game. Like, these are massive, massive successes and forwards in that sense. Going into the weekend, obviously still no Burt. We lost Larkin. I was starting to think, oh, man, we're in for an absolute beast in here. But actually, I can see the tide is kind of turning. It's kind of changing a little bit here. There's a lot of haters out there still for Jeff. Bless him. Blash was doing a cracking job there in many cases, but he does make some crazy decisions. But then you look at what he's playing with and you look at what's in front of him. We move back to that Yeza plan that all the Detroit Red Wings fans are going to talk to you about. All those people are following. We bought these contracts in phase 1. We sort of went out there, as you guys have alluded to previously, picked up these players with these bloated, inflated contracts because we had the salary space and we weren't at that cap. We could pick them up and pick those acquisitions up for the future in the draft trade. What we're looking to do now is going forwards into this trade in phase 2 and what value we can get out of the people we've picked up. So where are we going to go moving forwards? There's a lot of talk at the minute surrounding Bobby Ryan. I mean, best player for the club at the moment. It's definitely a fan's favourite up there in those trade talks. Publicly, we're saying over the last week or so, if Red Wings want to extend his contract, he's happy to kind of stay. He's enjoyed his time in Detroit. Remember, he's only just coming back in a year on from that notorious return with the Senators with his 3-goal hat-trick after that personal support off ice. I think he's been a brilliant player to the organisation. His positivity and that vibe he brings is immense. Equally, with that kind of value, clubs looking to pick him up. If they're making the playoffs, he could add value to some of those bottom 6 lines and things like that. He's a good acquisition that we might need to trade away. I know that's going to be controversial to a lot of Wings fans. He's a big favourite out there. And believe me, I want to keep him if we can. But equally, I'm looking at that bigger picture. If we start to look as well into the phase 2, you've got people like Glendening and Stoll. Everybody is hating on him at the minute and what sort of he's been doing over in Detroit. But still, could he add trade value? And did we bring in trade value when we bought him? Yes, most definitely we did. But other positives and takeaways? We broke that power play drought. Hey, that power play goal from Juice, that was worth it just for that at the weekend. I mean, excellent play. And bringing Svechnikov back up as well from the taxi squad and putting him in, everybody was wanting to see that. The guy deserved a break with all the injuries he's had. That's been a fantastic success story for me too. And hey, Gagner's hat trick, that was nice. That could add trade value going into the future. Yeah, there's always going to be those negatives. We are always going to be that lower team at the minute. People need to see that bigger picture and to think about it with the Wings and what's going on there. Moving forwards, I'm happy. I was never going to be challenging for contenders. I think when somebody asked me how I was feeling about this season initially, my words were cautiously optimistic. It wasn't about making the playoffs. It was never going to be. Yes, we brought in people that could play at the minute. It was about giving those youngsters experience. And like you alluded to, our bigger contracts. We've got Cedar playing in the SHL at the minute with Rugel. He's absolutely on fire if anybody's following the SHL and sort of how things have been going over there. For a D-man, that guy can play. And he's not just a big hitter. You look at the passes he makes and the way he reads the transitional game and things like that. Exceptional player. No, I think it was positive. And hey, to have won 2 games out of the 3, we'll just not discuss the 7-2 hammering too much at the minute. Lots maybe small issues there that need tweaking, shall we say. But positively, I think going forwards, it's a good situation and it's a good time to be in. And to showcase those players and move those lines around for that possible future value, it's going to be all about what we're getting in that trade in the next few weeks and what we can do continuing to go forwards. But no, good weekend, I think, overall.
Yeah, honestly, I completely agree with you where you got to look at the bigger picture when it comes to the Red Wings. And it's the same thing I've been talking about with the Ottawa Senators. And I find it ironic because there's the parallels between Bobby Ryan, between the Ottawa Senators and the Detroit Red Wings. I did not like, first of all, only because I actually have, a Red Wings ear for once. I did not like how Ottawa treated that Bobby Ryan exit. And Tom and I talked about it in one of our episodes, like way back in 2020, it feels like, discussing his exit from Ottawa. And I always felt it was the wrong decision. And I'm so glad he ended up to, getting that real opportunity in the Red Wings. And he's showing just how talented he's always been. And it's so great to see that he's still maintaining that. And it's awesome. But yeah, I mean, the bigger picture with the Red Wings, you've got a lot of great prospects coming up. And it was great to see Svechnikov actually, coming back strong, especially because he was a former high draft pick. A lot of people forget and just how talented he can be. He's had some really tough breaks, especially on, the injury side of things. So it'll be interesting to track just to see if he can kind of capitalize on this momentum right now coming into this week and just going forward in general. Evgeny Svechnikov is definitely a name to kind of keep in mind, for weeks going forward. But we're going to dive a little bit into my Devil's Den at the moment, which bit of a rough week for the New Jersey Devils this week. Bit of a rough week, only winning 1 out of 4 of their games this week. All right, so we'll start with the bad. So Blackwood started all 4 games this week. I mean, that's pretty good. He didn't look nearly as comfortable as he has. And I'm starting to wonder a little bit, is this based on, or rather, is this because his post-COVID troubles are coming up? Is it because he's having trouble breathing? Is it because, he can't necessarily settle down like he normally has been able to because of his breathing? It's something that he talked about in interviews, how heavily affected he was post-COVID, not necessarily during COVID, but just like post-COVID, being able to breathe on the ice, and especially in games where he can't necessarily catch a break and he's, caught in the defensive zone so much and taking shots left and right, it can be really, really difficult for somebody, who might be suffering from something like asthma related, if it's normal asthma. But in this case, I think not a lot of people realize how COVID is affecting players, post having COVID in general, and not even just players, people in general. And I think it's just something to kind of keep in mind. If a player does end up getting COVID, watch over the next week, when that player does return, watch how they play. There are some players that come back, they're totally fine. There are some that aren't right. And Blackwood might be one of those people that's having a really, really rough go of it lately. Now, that being said, I wasn't that disappointed with his play this week. It'll be interesting to see how many games he starts this week. I know he wants the majority of the games. He has talked about the fact that he wants to start the majority of the games. I think it would have been the better decision to put Aaron Dell in for one of those games, just so that way Blackwood could catch a break, especially when you had a back-to-back against the Capitals. I think it would have been better to start Aaron Dell for one of those games. I know Blackwood wants to be the knight in shining armor for the Devils. I know he wants to be the main guy. but he also needs to realize that he needs that break every once in a while, especially a guy that young. So I would like to see Aaron Dell get a crack this week, just to play one game this week, keep him fresh, keep the legs moving. The good and the really good, as I might want to add, Pavel Zacha. Holy moly, Pavel Zacha has been really, really good as of late. He's been fantastic even, and honestly, it's putting it lightly. He has a 10-game point streak that is still currently going. It has not ended. It is a 10-game point streak right now. He has 6 goals, 8 assists for 14 points in 17 games. He has been fantastic for the Devils, and I think the biggest difference that I see in Pavel Zacha right now is I actually notice when he's on the ice now, whereas beforehand, especially in John Hines' system before, he was one of those guys that just kind of blended into the ice, blended into plays, was kind of a chameleon. Now I actually notice when he's on the ice. I actually notice when he's trying to pick up a play. I notice him in the slot very, very often now. His wrist shot has been fantastic. That far side wrist shot that he took in overtime against I'm trying to remember. I'm blanking on who they played this week. I think on Buffalo this week was awesome. It was great. Or actually, no, it might have been against Boston. But still, Pavel Zacha has been fantastic, and he's finally becoming that breakout player that the Devils have been waiting to see. And this is not, a player that was picked like 3rd round, 2nd round. He was a former number 6 overall pick back in 2015. And a lot of people thought that he was the wrong pick at the time. A lot of people have had a lot of animosity for Pavel Zacha, and you have those same people that their opinion is starting to change ever so slowly on him, especially in his emerging season. He is a player to watch out for. He's a guy that I picked up in my fantasy hockey league, and he paid dividends for me this week, finally getting back in that win column for me. So I am super happy about that. And I'm just happy I got a crack at him first, and he certainly helped this week for me. But right now, we're going to be moving on to our general weekly hockey thoughts, just things that kind of stuck out in our minds of, things that was kind of cool to see. Tom, I'm going to start with you, but apparently you've been keeping this a surprise for this week. So who do you want to talk about, Tom? Is it Austin Matthews or no?
I know, at this point every week you just say, he's going to talk about Austin Matthews again. Why don't we just keep inserting stock footage and let him say the same thing over and over again every week and save his breath? Well, guess what? I'm not going to talk about Austin Matthews. I'm not going to talk about the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'm going to talk about an original 6 team with a superstar American player, and I'm going to talk about another American player that team has who's a pretty good player himself. And that team is the Chicago Blackhawks. They really have been turning some heads, and, I haven't been paying much attention to them, but I watched a few of the games last week. I watched their game Saturday against Detroit. I mean, Detroit beat them up a little bit, but, with what Patrick Kane is doing this year, he's got to be a shoo-in for the Hart Trophy, man. He's carrying that team, a team that I know we both wrote off, said this team is going nowhere. They're going to be bottom feeders. They're going to be in contention for a lottery pick. They're in a playoff spot right now. And it's Patrick Kane, obviously, an American superstar, but it's another kid doing it too for them. That's Alex DeBrincat, also tearing it up for them. And the funny part about it is, and I just looked up the Brincat stats, very similar path to Kane, shunned college to go play juniors in the Ontario Hockey League, tore it up in the OHL, and now he's tearing it up for the Blackhawks. I got to tip my cap to these guys. I really do. You have Patrick Kane right now, 2nd in scoring, 11 goals, 23 assists, 34 points. And you have DeBrincat, who's actually 7th in scoring right now, 11 goals, 14 assists for 25 points. As of right now, the Blackhawks are in 3rd place in the Central, 1 point behind Florida, 2 points behind Tampa. They could technically, I don't know if this is going to happen, but technically overtake Tampa from 1st place at some point. Will it happen? I don't know. But if they stay the course and they go into the playoffs and say they match up with Florida and say Kirby Dack feels better, and let's just say out of the blue, Jonathan Toews says, you know what? I want to play hockey again, just like Peter Forsberg did with Colorado in 2002 and tore it up. You might be looking at it. You might be looking at a team like Tampa, a team like Florida won't want to play, and a team like Tampa will be saying, whoa, hold on a minute here. Wait a minute. We have a healthy Jonathan Toews. We have a superstar in Patrick Kane, and we have Alex DeBrincat, who's also a pretty good player. I would watch out for the Blackhawks now. They're doing pretty well now, and I would just keep an eye on them for the rest of the way because they are definitely turning my head and turning a lot of other people's heads.
Well, thank God you didn't talk about Austin Matthews this week. I feel so blessed this week to not hear his name. So thank you for that. I truly appreciate that. Bex, it's time for your highlights. What stuck out to you this week?
I've got to say fair play with the Blackhawks and the Kane comment as well, having watched that game and him obviously getting that 400. It deserves some respect and some credit there. He's working his ass off over there. And I think, obviously, Tate's being out, he's had to step up and make that contribution. He deserves some recognition. Also, similarly to yourself, where you picked up on Pavel Zacha, I also picked him up when he came back from the COVID list for my fantasy hockey. He has been nailing it for me. Cracking acquisition there. Sitting quite pretty with that one. But no, for me, I'm going to go back and touch on Gino and Svechnikov again, essentially, because I think him coming back in and coming back up was massive. But also on the older social media, there was tragedy in the Detroit Red Wings family with Chika's passing recently, and he dedicated his goals to the memory and to that. It was just a really nice moment, I think, for him and the organisation as a whole. It came together well. And also, I don't know if you guys have seen on social media or anybody's been around the $10,000+ that was raised with finally getting a power play goal from the Detroit Red Wings fans as well for sort of the charity and that. That's been a great movement sort of going forwards and going on and ending that drought. But a bonus on always round. So those for me were my top touches this weekend.
That's a really cool highlight, actually, with the Red Wings fan that raised that money for charity due to the power play draft for the Red Wings. But hey, it means it's going to a great cause, and that's the biggest thing about that. My highlight this week, before he got injured in this particular game, I was pleasantly surprised by Linus Ullmark this week for Buffalo, which, there's not a lot to look forward to in Buffalo right now, but yeah, Ullmark was a bright spot this week. He stood on his head against the Devils, and the Devils peppered him with like 43 shots on goal, and he just was a brick wall in net for them. And, even going into that first period, coming out of that first period, unfortunately was injured after the first period. But even in the first period of that second Devils matchup that he had last week, he was really, really solid. And I was pleasantly surprised by how good that he looked. And he was definitely one of the only players trying to keep Buffalo afloat. I mean, certainly Jeff Skinner's not doing much to do that right now, to be honest. No shots on goal in his return from being scratched. Maybe that's why you're scratched, buddy. Just saying. All right, so to wrap things up this week, it is time, as always, to get to our listener question of the week. And to explain the segment as I always do, usually what I'll do is I'll usually post a question on Twitter and on Facebook, usually over the weekend, asking what the listeners' questions are. And if you're lucky, your question could be highlighted in a future video, such as this, which this question comes from Original Tammy on Twitter. And she asks, why are suspensions so inconsistent? It is a never-ending problem. I think the system needs to change. Make every suspension more games for that player. First offense, 1 or 2 games. Second offense, 5 games automatically. Third offense, 10 games automatically. Take the guesswork out. Make the players more accountable. So, I'll go with my thoughts on this one first. To be honest, you already kind of have a system in place. I feel like there is already, some form of system in place. I think there needs to be a little bit more gray area, but I think the reason why there's gray area is because it depends on the severity of the situation. It depends on the severity of the offense. We obviously hear so many times about, well, this player is going to have a hearing based on a hit from this game. This player is going to have a hearing based on this penalty from this game. And a lot of times what we find is maybe it's a 1 or 2 game suspension, a 3 game suspension, or maybe like a $10,000 fine, so on and so forth. But I think what a lot of people kind of lose track of is you do have players in the league that are repeat offenders. You have your Tom Wilsons, you have your Rafi Torres, you have your Brad Marchands to an extent, guys who have been penalized multiple times, where Brendan Shanahan, who is usually in charge of handling, not anymore. Sorry. Well, back in the day, he was in charge of disciplinary measures in the NHL. I loved his weekly recaps of suspensions and why a player was suspended for a particular reason. I think that's something that needs to make a comeback to educate the fans on why a particular player gets a certain number of games. I thought that was a really, really great thing that the NHL instituted, and I never understood why that kind of went away. You have a Tom Wilson who might get suspended for, 10 games because of an egregious hit, because he's honestly done it one too many times before. You have Connor McDavid make the same exact hit. Maybe he's only going to get a game because he's not a repeat offender. He's not a guy that's constantly doing that. So I'll turn it over to you guys. I'm going to turn it over to Tom first, and then I'll turn it over to Bex. Tom, what are your thoughts on this particular question? Do you feel like it's inconsistent?
I don't know if it's inconsistent per se, but to do a hard line like the original Tammy on Twitter said to first offense 1 or 2 games, second offense 5 games. You got to understand too. These refs are humans. These players are humans. You brought Connor McDavid into the conversation. Now, say McDavid does something boneheaded and gets himself a game. Okay, whatever. Well, say a game, say, a month, 2 months, couple weeks down the line, whatever. You decide the timeline. That's for whomever to decide. But just say McDavid goes into the corner and, it's a questionable call. He boards somebody and gets himself thrown out. And then later on, they suspend him and they go back and look at it, and the ref says, oh, no, I made the wrong call. Now Connor McDavid is out 5 games. It hurts the Oilers. And to be honest with you, as much as I hate to say it, it hurts the league because he's the best player in the league right now. So now you're taking him out of 5 games. So, that's the best player in the league who you're sitting down for 5 games. I think as of right now, what they had, the way they had it with Shanahan and I believe George Paros is running the show now, it's probably the best it's ever been. It's, it's the crackdowns are as good as they've been, but, at the same time, to take guys out 5 or 10 games, and, if you get a guy, what if he does it a 4th time? You're going to suspend him for 40 games for a hit? There's guys who had 40 games for terrible offenses or doing terrible things off the ice. Then it's going to turn into a CBA problem. It's going to turn into the PA coming to the league and saying, what the hell are you doing here? Now you're basically holding this guy's whole contract out. He can't feed his family. So, I think we're fine with the way it is. I don't believe it needs to be changed.
That's fair. Bex, what are your thoughts?
I'm going to agree. I think keep it the way it is. I don't think we need the changes. I'm also going to touch on that bias and the inconsistency because I think sometimes there's a preconceived conception there when a player's going in for something. If it's one of those guys that's consistently making those hits or has got a bit of that reputation for something versus, like you say, a first-time offence, I think sometimes the fan bias comes into it and they perceive it. Things watching a lot of social media, you see it, you watch the hit back, you see how things go. Perhaps actually the guy that was taking the challenge, he was hitting to the boards, maybe his head wasn't up, maybe he was a little late off the puck, things like that. There's other factors to be considered. You're always going to get those guys that are going in. They've got that little bit of a goonish streak, for want of a better way of putting it. Some of those that we've sort of touched on at times in elements. But no, I think I like it and the accountability in the way it is. I think it's fairly consistent. I also should say, coming from a system of watching it in England and watching our elite league over here, inconsistency in refereeing, oh my gosh, you guys have got it made over in the NHL and on that level and that standard. It's far, far better and head and shoulders above. Some of the examples that I moaned about, you're just like, no, just sip it. That's textbook. It'll do me quite happily. But yeah, no, I agree. You're going to make or break somebody over something that could be a change of mind. It could be actually we've watched it back, we've slowed it down, we've done it this way. Those calls on the ice are tough. I know they can go and watch a replay now, but it's not the same, and it's not the same context as when it's happening there. So no, I agree. I'm happy with the system. I think it's quite better. The only thing I would like to see is go back to commentating on it because I think it would improve fan education on that issue, and that'd maybe be a bonus going forwards.
Yeah, I agree. You might not have gotten a lot of views on those videos, but you know what? I remember watching those videos and I was just like, that makes a lot more sense. So, educating your fans is never a bad thing. So honestly,
one thing I want to say about it now, though, is if you have a guy, George Paros, in charge, who was gooned it up his whole career. So now everyone's saying, okay, well, now we have this guy who made a career out of throwing illegal hits and a career out of fighting people, explaining to us why he's suspending somebody. I understand why they did it with Shanahan. Shanahan was a great hockey player. But I can maybe understand why they don't do it with George Paros right now.
Yeah, I guess I can understand it at that point. A little bit more well-spoken, Brendan Shanahan was. But even then, you could still have, a stock guy have something written out for them and then they explain it. Heck, give Doc Emmerich a little bit of work if he wants to do it again. Like, have him do that. I'd listen to Doc Emmerich talk about suspensions all day, every day. Give me even Chico. Chico's fine too. But Original Tammy, thank you so much for your question. Definitely it was a good question for us to sink our teeth into. But as always, guys, what do you guys think? Drop a comment down below. I can't speak today. Drop a comment down below. Make sure that you like and subscribe if you like what we're talking about today. And as always, please make sure that you check out our newly renovated website, i80sports.com, where you can even pick up a shirt like this. Might not look great on me, but it might look good on you. So please make sure that you pick up this shirt today, especially if you're looking, towards maybe decorating yourself for St. Patty's Day. It is just around the corner, and you do want to make sure it arrives in time. Order yours today. There are also many different other styles for you to take a look at. Hats, even if that is up your alley as well. And as always, too, make sure that you follow us down below at I80_SportsNHL. We want more followers. We want to discuss things with you guys. It only happens if you join us. So make sure that you join us. And speaking for joining us, Bex, thank you so much for joining us this week. And you were certainly a wealth of knowledge, and you certainly added a lot to our coverage this week. So thank you so much for coming onto our show this week. But I'm Brian. He's Tom. She's been Bex. This has been I80 Sports NHL.